that we may be made worthy promises of Christ.
God's only begotten Son, by his life, death, and resurrection,
has purchased for us the rewards of eternal salvation.
Grant me this day that meditating upon these mysteries in the most holy rosary of the Blessed Virgin Mary, we may meditate what they contain, what they promise, through Christ our Lord. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus,
have mercy on us.
Immaculate Heart of Mary,
Pray for us.
Mary, help Christians,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for
Saint
us.
General Bosco,
Pray for
all
us.
the saints of God. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Good evening.
Good evening, Father.
Am I heard? Yeah. Thanks for joining us this evening in person. Nice to see so many of you here in person. Lovely to have you. And also it encourages the speaker, right? To see some people in person and not only in online. And thanks to all of you who are watching us also online. Thanks for joining us this evening for this Advent mission in our parish. So before we begin, shall we say a short prayer? And do all of you have this little prayer card that was given to you? Do any of you need it? All of you have it? We'll be praying this prayer together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. A prayer for families. Loving and merciful God, say together. We pray for the many needs of families, for abundant love, for forgiveness and reconciliation, for a living faith to face the challenges of each day. Jesus, you were born into a human family and became our brother. You know well what families need to nourish both children and parents in long-lasting bonds of love and respect. Help families of all shapes and sizes turn to you as your source of life. May your Spirit encourage husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters. Give us all the eyes to appreciate one another and to be grateful for the gift of families. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Mary, help of Christians, Saint Joseph, Saint John Bosco, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear brothers and sisters, please join me in welcoming Dr. Rhian Topping. And I have a very short introduction, but then I wanted to say something about him, so I was searching for his academic curriculum vitae, and it was 10 pages long. I said if I have to read the whole thing, I may take the whole evening, right? So I just got something very short to introduce Dr. Rhian this evening. A native of Saskatoon, Canada, Dr. Topping earned an MA in philosophy from the University of Manitoba, as well as an MPhil and a doctorate in theology from the University of Oxford. He is a professor of theology and serves as vice president and academic dean at Newman Theological College, Edmonton. He formerly taught at Thomas More College in New Hampshire and held the Pope John the 23rd Chair of Studies in Catholic Theology at St. Thomas University, Canada. Dr. Topping has published on a variety of Catholic themes and figures, from St. Augustine to Dante to G.K. Chesterton in academic and popular journals. He has got a number of articles and books written, and some of his books are available at the back of the church for you to purchase and read for your reading pleasure. He has published several books on Catholic culture and education, including Rebuilding Catholic Culture, How the Catechism Can Shape Our Common Life, and Renewing the Mind, a reader in the philosophy of Catholic education, published by Catholic University of America Press in 2015. He authored a book in 2019 titled Christmas Around the Fire, Poems, Stories and Lessons for the Season of Christ's Birth. So isn't it the right person to talk to us for for this Advent mission. Also, we are going to talk about the family, right? Dr. Topping and his wife have 10 children, and 2 of them are here with us. Welcome, boys. I came to know more about him and made my first contact with him through our past Grand Knight, Steve McConnell, and he should be here to introduce him because he knows him very well. And I came to know that he is a strong advocate for homeschooling, and that tells me how much he appreciates his family. And I just took 3 people to say something about him. One was for the Richard P. Harris of the Diocese of St. John, speaking at the Catholic Teachers and Service Day at Fredericton, New Brunswick. He says, Dr. Topping brought home the fact that a true Catholic education is not just generic education with an added dollop of religious teaching, but is founded on and embedded with its own principles of truth and Christian value. A Catholic teacher from the Diocese of Manchester says, I had a wonderful experience in all his 3 sessions. And Dr. Diane Kowski of Catholic Medical Guild, Tampa, Florida says, Dr. Topping is truly a gifted speaker. And so we are truly blessed to have Dr. Topping this evening with us. And thanks for accepting to be here with us, and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'll just trust that the sound is working. If it's not, then give me a wave or shout my way. Also, good evening to those who are not here but are somehow here. I'm sure you're going to have a good time too, wherever you are. Now, my wife and I, Anna, we've been married for 21 years, and we were Protestant when we grew up. We converted about the same time, converted at the same time that our son Peter was born. Now, Peter, you can look at the back. He's the stronger looking one. I don't know. Fight it out. We have 9 boys. And let me tell you, they like to fight it out. But Peter's our eldest, and we've got 1 girl to boot, and she's the cutest. About the same time that we had Peter in the belly, we met a family that stopped us in our tracks. Now, this family radiated joy and peace and orderliness and serenity. In other words, all the things that we didn't have at that point and we don't really have now, or we wanted, but they don't naturally come our way. And we couldn't get enough of this family. We met them I think it was at church. We were living in England at the time. And we literally pulled on their sleeves and we wanted to talk to them. And we did because we saw their kids. And their kids were, they're angelic. Actually, in the end, a couple of them now, I think at least 2 are Dominicans, and a third is, I think, going to become a Dominican, and a 4th is married with children. So they have these remarkable children, and we thought, whatever they have, we want to have the same thing. So we got ourselves invited, and we basically just asked them questions. Now, over the next 3 nights, and I'm so happy that you're here. It's there are so few occasions when we get to be physically in the midst of each other's presence. But over these next 3 nights, I'm going to be telling you stories and anecdotes and trying to draw out principles that we've come along as a family, or we've come across from other families that we think radiate this kind of joy and peace and orderliness. Now, in other words, families that radiate a beautiful Catholic culture. Now, these kinds of families are not families that don't have suffering or misfortune or sin or bad breath, all the rest of it. Now, of course, there's a whole mix. But what is unique about these families that at least I have in mind, and that I'll try to bring before your imaginations over these few days, is that these families, in the midst of a great deal of darkness and often hopelessness when it comes to the family, are able to stand forth as a beacon of light, as a rock in the midst of waves, as an island of sanctity. And they have this attractive quality about them, that they attract and they bring others into the orbit of their own radiating joy. And they can do that in the midst of the tragedies of life. As we grow closer to the Lord in sanctity, of course, it doesn't mean that we get to have a backstage pass and that the human tragedies sidestep us. No, of course not. They face us with the same amount of force that they face anyone else. And yet we can stand in the midst of these waket auf. We can stand upright and stand erect, as we do now in Advent, knowing that we have an end that is good. Well, so how did they do it? The question then, or the theme for these few nights. How did they do it? Or better, how can we do it? And how can we encourage others to do it? To have a family that can become a true center of Catholic culture. A family that can be a true center of radiating joy and of Catholic culture. Now, before I go any further, I bet none of you have a handout yet. Is that correct? If you have a handout, wave your hand. No. Okay, lads, if you don't mind, they're going to distribute a handout because I'm going to be referring to this sheet now and again. You don't have to look at it, of course, but if you want to, then it's going to be handy. So if you just come quickly, Peter and Thomas, that'd be great. Thank you. While they're coming out and handing out these, I suppose I should stay here more or less because we'll have other people watching. But while they're handing these out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a praise, and it's on this handout, of each of the 3 nights. So you can decide, if tonight wasn't so hot, but you'd like to give Thursday night a try, because, you can do that, or if you want to skip Thursday and just come back tomorrow, or just not come back at all, that's fine. You know what you're getting into. So tonight's talk is called Moolah, Why Almost Everyone Should Get Married. And here's what we're in for. Have we become a post-marriage culture? Up until recently, the family has been widely recognized and experienced as the chief contributor to the prosperity, the virtue, and the happiness of nearly every individual and of society. Yet, the family today seems everywhere under attack. Discover the 3 modern anti-marriage myths that undermine the family and how to expose them. That's tonight. Talk 2. Ora, learning to pray like Benedictines. Like a Benedictine monastery, every household is called to sanctify time through the practice of ora et labora, prayer and work. Learn how to form a rule of life for your home and how you can daily, weekly, and yearly weave disciplined piety into the fabric of your household. Ora. Talk 3, labora, education as the family's lasting work. To build a thriving culture, the family needs to pursue many works. Financial stability, prayer, leisure, service. No work is more integral to the family, though, than the education of its children. Discover the 3 phases of Christian education from kindergarten to college and how you can foster virtue in your children through each period of their formation. So if we wanted to summarize that, what we're going to focus is, tonight we're going to talk about ideas, tomorrow night we're going to talk about habits, and then Thursday night we're going to try to draw them together using education as our test case, so to speak, where ideas and practical habits and disciplines are instantiated and bear fruit. 2 other features I think I've mentioned just before we dive in. So the first is that each night we'll have time for questions, potentially throughout, but also certainly at the end. So do have your minds and your hearts working and think, okay, what's been said here that piques my interest, that makes me indignant, that perhaps urges me onto something, or that I'd like clarity on, or whatever. We're also going to have a brief examination of conscience at the end of each session. So we'll have a couple of minutes of silence when I'll put a few questions to you, but especially I'll ask you to consider making a resolution based on the things that we've been talking about. So we have a few minutes of silence at the end. firstly, and then secondly, there will be time for discussion and questions after. Also, at the very back, I do have a couple of, as Father mentioned, I have a couple of books. I teach at Newman, which is a great pleasure and joy. For those of you who have, I'll just name this now, for those of you who have children or grandchildren or friends or cousins or whatever who are in the 18 to 23 slot, Newman has done many great things for 50 years. New this year, we're starting we've launched a Great Books BA program. It's fully accredited, so you can move from there to law, to teaching, to whatever, at least theoretically, homemaking, whatever you'd like, heaven, hopefully. So anyways, if you have young people in your life who are of that age and are thinking, what am I going to do? I'd like some more Christian formation. I'd like more, I'd like to go deeper in my faith, but also do it in such a way that is going to rigorously form my mind and help me to see how faith and reason go together. Well, we've just got something beautiful for you. All right, sorry. So I actually forgot. I only have one little Newman pamphlet with me, but tomorrow night I'll bring a few more. So those are other features to bear in mind. So let's begin. Talk 1, Mula. Our theme this evening is why almost everyone should get married. I'd like to tell you the story of the courtship of my wife and myself, in very brief terms. So I grew up in Saskatchewan, and my wife grew up in Alberta, British Columbia. In fact, if you've seen those awful pictures on the news, where most people are standing under 10 feet of water, that's exactly where she grew up, in the Lower Mainland, in the valley there. The little town that she grew up is called Yarrow. It was a Mennonite village, essentially, and it's surrounded by a dike, which means it's now just waiting to be engulfed by Noah's floods. So we grew up there. We both grew up Mennonite, and we met in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, where we studied at a Mennonite college and university. Now, marriage, when I was growing up, I'm 44. So when I was in high school and entering college, so in the 90s, marriage was still very much, in my experience in Saskatchewan, it was kind of the Bible Belt, statistically, is very much the ideal. It was the default. I didn't know, I could probably count on my one hand the number of kids I knew from divorced families. And I'm very social, I knew a lot of people. And the same would be true for my wife. Now, we met at this little college. Now, a couple of you I see walked in. Cam Regier is somebody goes to the Basilica Regiers. Anyways, they've been friends of ours for 25 years. And Cam Regier was my first college roommate. And Cam was a wonderful guy to be with. He was just fantastic. But, if you've ever seen him and you see my wife, well, I chose the better part. It's kind of fun and all to be chums for a few years together. But it was never a question, really, in my mind or in the mind of most of my friends, that where we're headed is to marriage. Like, what else would you do? By the fourth year of college, I was not sure any longer if I could still be a Mennonite. And so my faith was becoming, anyways, I was just not sure. So I was studying philosophy, and I became enchanted in a way by Catholicism, though I didn't know any Catholics. I was training to be a pastor. And the Catholics were the ones that we always wanted to convert. Why? Because they smoke, drink, dance, and do stupid things on Friday nights. Except us Mennonites, beside people like us Mennonites who didn't smoke, drink, dance, and have weddings that to Catholics seem terribly boring. Like, what are you going to do at a wedding if you're not drinking and dancing? I don't know. They tend to tell stories and tell really funny stories. So they're maybe not as exciting as a Catholic wedding. Anyways, so the fourth year, I was starting to consider a monastic vocation. It's kind of interesting. The Mennonites that I grew up with were ecumenical, and they were they were open to mystical things, and we had a Benedictine abbey not too far. So this was in my mind. This was my go-to plan after college. At church, however, at our local Mennonite church, I got asked one Sunday to teach a Sunday school class on I think it was the letters of John. And I happened to have a young lady, another student, a bunch of us students were going to this church, River East MB, Mennonite Brethren. She was also asked to teach it with me. Now, of course, looking back 25 years, I know this was a setup from heaven. They're just having fun pulling these strings and seeing what's going to happen. But I was actually kind of indignant because I thought I would do a really good job teaching this Sunday school class. I don't need her help. No, somehow Anna, who later did become my wife, not very much after that, she thought, no, I would like to teach this with you, and I think we do a good job as a tag team. So I very reluctantly, I was studying Greek at the time. I thought, I don't need her help. Now this is just a distraction. But anyways, I said, fine, we can come along and we'll do it together. Well, we ended up having long walks. The church was an hour away from college. So, and the autumn was beautiful and warm. And oh, does my wife have good legs. I mean, oh my goodness. So we have these beautiful long walks, and pretty soon a group of us friends decide we need to learn how to ballroom dance. And so we go to Ted Motika's studio, a group of 8 or 12 of us, Portage and Maine. And I was pretty soon I felt indignant because there were 1 or 2 dances where Anna, me, Clausen didn't have a partner, and I thought, well, this is not correct. So I should just volunteer to be her dance partner for the rest of our time at Ted Motika's dance studio. So I did that, and then I would say, well, what was it? It was about 3 months later that we were engaged, and about 5 months later or so that we were married in August. And it only took 15 years for Anna's parents to accept me. It's not bad. It's not bad. I think we had about, it took about 7 kids, and then they thought, yeah, this is really going to stick, and I guess we do like our grandkids, so we'll tolerate the guy that Anna brought home. Okay, well, what's my point here? In classic literature and film, think Jane Austen, think stuff before zombie thrillers. The classic ending to a story, to a romance, including a fairy tale, is they come together and everything ends happily ever after. Marriage is, you might say, the consummation of the grand romance. And then after that, there's clear sailing, and the story has ended well. We don't need to know the rest of the details. They will play out in their own particular ways, but we know that the parachute has opened. And for those of us who have children or grandchildren, it is that kind of feeling, isn't it? Once they arrive at marriage, well, we'll see how they land, but it's probably going to be okay. Now, Western society for thousands of years has taken on this view, and let's say since 1950, or if you go to Marxism, 1850, this has been continually eroded and derided, and of course it's not all just a fairy tale after you get married, because there's a whole lot of tragedy, and you have earthquakes, and you get run over by trains, and you find out your spouse is actually really hard to live with, and your husband's kind of a jerk, and all the rest of it. So we know it's a complicated story, but for almost 2,000 years, Western people thought the narrative was fundamentally correct. We know there's going to be complications, but getting young people to that point where they are married is the best way to open that parachute for the rest of their lives. Up until yesterday, here's the thesis, you might say, of the evening, the proposition I put before you. Up till yesterday, marriage was universally recognized as the bedrock to society's health and to every one of our happiness, as the bedrock to our collective health and to our personal happiness. And that's correct. At least I'd like to convince you of that by the time we're done in 40 minutes. Why? Why is it that this story of the grand build-up, the grand romance leading to marriage, why is that a happy ending? Even though we know there are complicated details that are to come. Well, it's the rite of passage that makes boys turn into men and makes women into mothers, and both of them into parents and grandparents. Each one of them, when the two become one flesh, find their other half. St. Augustine, and here he's echoing the common view of the ancient world, the Christian world, says that friendship, true friendship, is the experience of finding that you are not alone in the world. In fact, that there's another self for whom you'd like to give yourself. Pope Leo XIII, the greatest pope of the 19th century, he says at the beginning of the Catholic social teaching tradition, it's in Rerum Novarum, he says that when a marriage is born, a new society is born. Older and more foundational and fundamental than the state, and having rights and duties that predate the state, in which the state has no right to meddle in. This sexual ecology, that is marriage, renews and gives birth to a social ecology. And when the sexual ecology begins to break apart, well, so does the social ecology begin to break apart. Now the problem is something's happened. Yikes! Our story, our grand fairy tale has come apart. It's unraveled, at least for a lot of us. The story of romance that survived. Think of this. It survived the collapse of the Roman Empire. Nothing more calamitous than this. When Jerome heard of it in 410, he said he wept uncontrollably, couldn't stop himself. It survived the barbarian invasions of Northern Europe, the colonization, the brutal colonization by Muslims, all through North Africa, up through the Middle East, into Europe. The plague of the Black Death, a few centuries of a few scandalous popes. It survived the wars of religion in the 16th century, the French Revolution in the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution, mostly, in the 19th century, the Communist Revolution, and even 2 world wars. This thing, this cloud that's been covering this beautiful, this beautiful star that's been guiding our romance and the structure of our way of organizing ourselves for 2,000 years could survive all this, but it couldn't survive the Third World War. That's another name for the sexual revolution. The Third World War. We beat the communists with tanks and rosaries and a little bit of philosophy. But unfortunately, we've been duped and taken in. We've found captivating this idea that men and women should no longer dance together, that we should all be left free to ride solo. And so the Western mind has been captivated and become captive to a set of ideas and propositions that is slowly draining away our lifeblood and stealing away the prospects of happiness for your kids and your grandkids. And all of us together. There's a novel, you've probably read this or heard of it. Some of my kids just were reading it and discussing it with friends. It's called The Song of Nagasaki. It's about the bombing of Japan and the aftermath. And it seems to me that this is not a bad analogy for what happened on the level of culture. After World War II, after some of the social principles of communism were taken in by us and given free parking in our minds. It's like we're growing up in a totally different world. And it's hard to see how it happened so quickly. how the landscape changed. It's become almost recognizable in many places. What are we going to do tonight? We're going to do 4 things, and we're going to skip along. First, we're going to consider a little bit of a few statistics. We're going to ask, what is the state of marriage right now? And we're going to consider how many are rejecting marriage, even in the teeth of overwhelming empirical evidence that's been studied for decades, that shows the strong correlation between marriage and all the good outcomes we want for men, for women, for kids, and for communities. Secondly, we're going to identify 3 of the anti-marriage myths. That is to say, the ideas that undermine our confidence in this glorious God-given institution. And it's given to us by God. It's right there at the beginning in Genesis. And you find it in all societies in some form. Third, we're going to reflect a little bit on how can we play philosopher. In other words, when we encounter these ideas with our loved ones or in our own free parking spots up here, how can we think about them from the point of view of reason and revelation? We're going to try to draw from both. And then finally, we'll have a brief examination of conscience, just a couple of minutes of silence, reflection before the Lord, and then opportunity for questions. And we are supposed to be done, I think, in 3 hours. Is that what Father said? Well, that's what I heard. 5 hours, yes, okay. My wife was warning, my wife, she wasn't able to come tonight. I'm hoping she can come tomorrow. But she doesn't get to come to, when I give talks or whatever, she doesn't come now. But in the first, let's say, 10 years of our marriage, she would come to most talks. And boy, is she a tough critic. I mean, if I slip up, anything, she's got me. But it's nice, tonight I'm free, so I'm going to say what I want. Okay, so let's, is that fine? I mean, I don't know why you're here or what you were told. Oh yes, but I'll just say it this way. Tonight's we're going to focus on ideas. This is a parish mission, and that's what Father described this as. So it's not meant to be a bunch of lectures, so to speak. But tonight we are going to engage in ideas, and then tomorrow it's going to be very practical. Okay, we're going to. I don't want to tell you everything we're going to do, but we're going to basically walk through a day, a week, and a year, and try to think with the mind of the church about how it is we can build in a rule of life for ourselves and our own families. Now, we're all different ages here, but it's never too late to keep improving, right? Obviously, it doesn't matter what stage we are. As long as we're on this side of the grave, we're still imperfect. We're still in via. We're still moving toward patria, towards the fatherland. Okay, so I guess you don't really have any, I'm asking, is this okay to talk about these 3 things? And you can't really say anything back to me. but I hope it's okay. I hope you enjoy your time, our time together. And I certainly will. Okay, so let's start with the first. The first question we're going to ask, we want to survey the landscape just a little bit. This won't take long. You have a fantastic sense of the landscape, and in many ways, a better one than I do in different respects. I'm absolutely sure of that. So, first question is paragraph number 1 here. Have we become a post-marriage culture? Well, people are still getting married. I'm sure this church is busy, at least sometime in the summer. Basilica as well, I know has marriages coming through. So it's not that people aren't getting married, although statistically, actually, the drop in marriage is precipitous. It's wild. It's one of these indicators that where the needle has just bounced in a different direction. But a lot of people still get married. The question that I want to consider, though, as we run through a few statistics, and I don't want to definitively try to answer, but it is a real question, is have we shifted fundamentally somewhere in our cultural DNA where marriage is no longer, well, let's call it a public commitment, but rather a private choice? Okay, so that's what I mean by a post-marriage culture. where it's no longer an institution that is universally agreed upon, or more or less, where the laws, our customs, our habits support this thing. And has marriage become one choice? It might be, what's good for you is it's good for you, but no thanks. I'm interested in something else. Has it become relativized in this sense? I'm not sure. For me, it's an open question. Clearly, we're moving that way if we haven't already become post-marriage. Anyway, so that's a question I want to ask. Here are a few. Let's take a look at a couple of metrics only on family life and some of the quantitative measures we might look at. So first of all, cohabitation. Well, there's a lot more of that. 1,100% up in the last 40 years. When do people have babies? The average age has moved from the beginning of the 20s to the very end for the first baby. Very beginning to the very end. There's a whole new decade out there where instead of being a mom or a dad, what are you? I don't know. Going skiing, having fun. Doing something, not having kids. Canadian women, how many do we have once we get into the kid game? Well, it's something like I think it's 1.47 last time I looked. About 1.5. In the US, it's about 1.7. In Middle and Southern Europe, it's around 1.3 births per woman. Now, let me just explain that. Maybe it's obvious what's going on there. But you need 2.1 to keep up. What do we got now in Alberta? I think it's 4 million. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so 4 million today. And let's say we're projecting 4 million in 25 years. Well, that means that every woman who's in this province has to do their duty, on average, of having 2.1 kids. Okay, and if you don't do that, then you have to import them. Okay, they don't come from trees, right? They come from us, people. So if a society is going to remain in its population stable, you need 2.1. Why the 1? Well, okay, so I'm the dad, got my wife. Obviously, no baby's coming out of me, so she's got to have 2 to cover both of our bases once we croak. So 2 kids. And I need the 0.1 because 1 out of every 10 kids that come along is going to die young or something, get hit by a bus. So that's where the 0.1 comes. And that can vary a little bit depending on how good your healthcare is, whether you have wars and the rest of it. But you need 2. And we haven't been having 2 since, I think it was 1977. Since 1977, Canada fell below what's called, by demographers, replacement rate. Okay, so that's quite a while. That's my birthday. I hope I didn't ruin it for people. I was naughty in school, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't do it. Anyways, so there are a few, okay, and then comparisons. This compares to, what, 6%, oh, sorry. So how many kids? So we've got kids, okay, there are, we have a few of them, yes, they're coming later. What's the situation into which they're coming? Well, take 100 babies born in Edmonton, let's say this week. In 1960, 5 out of those 100 babies would have been born out of wedlock. Think about that, out of the lock and key of matrimony. What's that lock? That's a lock not to harm people. It's a lock to commit myself to love that kid and the mom and the dad. Okay, so 1965. 5 out of 100 are born into that situation, which wildly puts them at a disadvantage. Everyone knows this. You study this for an hour. It's the quantitative data is just reams of it ever. Okay, now in Canada, it's about 30 out of 100 kids are born out of wedlock. So that means dad is not there. In the US, it's even higher. It's 40. I think that's last year's stat from the CDC. And that breaks down in different ways, depending on racial compositions. Yeah, quite wild and dramatic differences there. That compares to 6% in Nigeria. Okay, only 6 out of 100 babies are born in wedlock. So they are, you might say, where Canada was in the 70s in terms of how they approach sex. Colombia is where, if we keep going in these trends, we're going to be in 20 years, 30 years, if we keep going. So they have 3 out of 4 kids are born in wedlock. Whoa. Yet. Okay, that's bad news. It's good news. Yeah, consider some of the well-known, well-studied, like by the mid-90s, this became a cottage industry in academia. People writing about the consequences of fatherlessness and the benefits of stable marriage. Okay, by the 90s, it was just like no one could claim, no policymaker could with a straight face say we don't know what the effects of these things are. It was just well known already by then. Let alone in 2015 when we brought in gay marriage in Canada by an act of Parliament. What this would do to the institution. Okay, so what are some of the benefits? Men, women, children. Can you see this is number 2? Kind of fun. I'm still hoping for this one to kick in, but anyways, maybe it doesn't apply to academics, I don't know. So for men, there's what sociologists call a wage premium of something between 10 and 40%, and it approaches 40% as you get older. Okay, so here's the scenario. Chap A, Chap B. They're both 25. They have identical pedigrees. They have the same kind of socioeconomic background, same education. Chap A gets married at 25. Chap B says, I want to keep skiing. So they get the same job. They both, I don't know what you want them to be, teachers. They're both school teachers. Or let's say they're both electricians. Okay, same job, same company. Go up 5 years. What's happened to them? A and B are now 30. B's still skiing at Fernie. What's A doing? His girlfriend got pregnant. So they got married. And now they're married with 1 kid, now 2 kids. There's a 3rd on the way. Woo! Things are heating up for man A. All of a sudden there are mouths to feed. And you can't just stay out whenever you like. It's nice to go with the boys. Yes. Man B is still going out with the boys. He's still gone all weekend up in the hills. He's bought a really nice SUV. He's got a dog. Man A, what's he doing? He's coming home, he's sweating it out. Now, psychologically, just play this up. What are you going to, motivationally, how are you going to act? What sorts of extracurricular habits are you going to take on? What do you have time for in your leisure? Where do you direct your free energies? In quite different directions, aren't they? You've got 3 little kids and a wife, as opposed to your SUV and your dog. It's what makes boys into men. This is not rocket science. For those of you who are men who have been married before, who've been married at some point, it is just manifestly plain. I mean, I look at my kids. They're hilarious. What's going to make them eventually clean up their room? I don't know. Somehow, we've got to offload them on somebody, because all the work's not going to be done by mom and dad. And I know that's what was thought about me when I was 19 and looking like an idiot, and acting like one most of the time too. Okay, so anyways, you project their careers forward, and as you keep going, the man who has a family versus the one who doesn't is going to be a lot more motivated to go and get that raise, or instead of slouching back, not taking the more difficult project because he doesn't want it to affect Fernie on the weekend. He's going to say, "Yeah, I think I'm ready for that challenge because I've got to put in another bathroom. I need an extra $5,000 a year. Otherwise things aren't going to be happy at home." Okay, and you just project that forward, and by the time they're done their careers, you have this all of a sudden widening gap. It's an amazing thing, but it's been well studied. How about for ladies? Well, there's a lot to say here. Married men I could talk about health, but anyways. For women, they're much more likely to report that they are happy, subjectively. So in other words, self-reported happiness. Don't worry about philosophy or metaphysics, just do you think you're happy? Self-reportedly, yes. If you're married, a woman is on average going to score far, far higher than anyone in any other state. According to a recent study, 50%, for example, of wives versus 27% of single women describe their emotional health as either very good or excellent. Okay? Women, by the way, it's just so fun when you get into this stuff and compare how do men and women think about their subjective, think about their happiness and about their relations as you move through time. It's just, it's mind-blowing and exciting, interesting. Generally, women are less happy than men are in terms of how they talk about it. I don't know if that means metaphysically they're less happy, but just in the way they express themselves. As it happens, too, more women are the ones that instigate divorces than are men. Sometimes you think, it's always the man running away. That's actually not true. Since we've had no-fault divorce, it's more often than not on the side of the lady. Anyways, just to note, when people bother to study this kind of thing, what they find is that, no, married women are far happier than ladies who are footloose and fancy-free. I could keep going. You can further specify this stuff. I don't want to go too far here, but if you ask now among married women, can we find other features that are correlated with higher self-reported degrees of happiness? Oh yeah, sure we can. We can narrow it down. What you end up finding is women who are married. Go down here. Women who are married are more happy than the others in other states. This is not, by the way, I'm going to say this. This is not to cast an aspersion, on people, ladies who are not married. Sometimes this is what you're not called to the vocation of marriage. You're not called to the vocation of singleness, by the way. Or if you are, I want to know what your definition of vocation is. That's not the way the word is normally used. Okay, but you can serve the Lord beautifully, wonderfully, as a single person. There's no doubt. We have a close friend of our family. She's a godmother of one of our kids. And oh my goodness, the amount of goodness that she pours into the families that she relates to, it's just overwhelming. And we often, she doesn't live close enough to our house to help us every day. We often think, oh my God, can we scrape together enough money to somehow bribe her to live closer to us so she can be here and help us more? Because she's like a guardian angel to various families. So I just want to make that point. Okay, it's not to disparage other states or conditions of life that one finds one in. However, I do want to point out the obvious thing that what we've made an ideal now. So let's say, I'll step back. I do want to point out that there are empirical reasons for why the ideal of marriage as the statistical norm that the path that most people should be walking on, why that is, why there's a rational empirical basis to that fundamental norm that yes, marriage is what most people should be called to. Okay, so that's the point I'm making. I hope I made that clear. Anyways, if you're a lady, you're married, you're happier on average than not. If you're religious, you're happier than if you're not religious and married. If you're very religious, let's say you go to church every week, you're a lot happier than those who are nominally religious. If you have kids, again, you're more happy. And if you have a lot of kids, sorry to say, you're at the top of the pyramid. It's true. It's true. Okay? I'll say in our own family, we've got 10 kids. These kind of stick out once in a while. And it's funny the kinds of comments that you get. So we used to get really snotty. I don't want to have a potty time here. Sometimes in class, I know something comes out. It's not my fault. Okay, it's not my fault. I had a bad upbringing. It's someone else's fault. It can't be mine. Anyways, we would get the most ridiculous comments. For a while, we lived in. We've lived in Europe, we've lived in Eastern Europe, we've lived in England. for a bunch of years on the east coast of the US and Canada. And anyways, so we've lived in some places that are far less pro-family than Alberta. Okay, Alberta is the heartland in terms of, we've got our problems, but take a look relative to other places. Religion and family here have a kicking chance. And, let's not be bowled over by the bullies. Let's fight our ground here. Anyways, I remember in some places, we would, in the first, 10 years or something, we'd get these comments like, oh, are these all your children? As in, which gutter did you pull them out of? And and you get this every time you go shopping. Okay, it's repeated. And then one time, the worst, and I wasn't here beside my wife. I wish I would have been, because it would have been a real thrill. Anyways, but a guy in a grocery line asked her, are these all your children? And I get this every time, so that's not bad. And then he said something like, well, you look like an intelligent woman. And she looked at him and she punched him in the face. No, she didn't. But she said something like, well, that's because intelligent women have children. And anyways, he cowered off and went to his own snotty corner. God bless him. But it's interesting, the rhetoric has changed. When you go around and you have a big family, you're a real target. You're kind of like a priest, by the way, who wears a collar. Okay? Or religious who wear their habits. People notice you and they want to talk to you. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. That's obviously the case for priests too. I know I used to go, I used to work at a college, Thomas More College, another fantastic, beautiful, uber-Catholic, great book school. And we take kids always mountain climbing on our the first weekend of term, more or less. And we had this one priest who was a chaplain, and he would go up on his cassock. He was in Washington. And people would just stop and go, oh, hi, Father. It's like it makes a spark come alive in someone. Not in everyone, but in some people. Okay, there's someone who's dedicated himself to God. And it calls out a latent faith or a memory of faith, or at least a question about faith. All the way up and down the mountain, people are stopping and want to talk and get a blessing, whatever. Well, when you have a larger family, it's, and by larger family now in Canada, it's 3. In Quebec, in grande famille is 3, right? So you're going to stick out. You have more than 2.1. Anyways, so in the first 10 years of our marriage, we would mostly get these kind of snotty comments. And then it's interesting. I don't know exactly what, but the last 10 years, much more positive. I guess just because people are overwhelmed and scared, or it's like, are you crazy? We were on the West Coast this summer visiting relatives, and we were at the edge of the coast by the sea, and we were sitting beside a homeless guy, and I go, whoa, those are all your kids. Whoa, praise the Lord. God bless you. God bless you. And another guy comes over, he starts talking to us, and we all start singing it. And God bless one and all. It's from Dickens. Anyway, so yeah, now it's interesting. You get a lot more positive comments. And what my wife will hear, especially when I'm not with her, is we'll have now people say, oh, you're lucky, your husband must be rich. I tell you, an academic theologian with 10 kids, not rich. But there's a kind of agonized longing that we hear much more now than the dismissive chip on the shoulder. And it's because people are lonely. There's an aching. We want family. We know that there are these bonds that aren't holding for us, or they're holding but they're frayed, or we see them holding for others and we want more of it. Okay, there's more to say. The last thing I'll say on the statistical side is, okay, how about for kids? Well, duh. Of course it's better for kids to have mom and dad together. Recently, I've got some statistics there. You can take a look. You can find 1,000 more if you're interested in this kind of thing. But we were just at a retreat a few weeks ago. Your son Louis was there. he sang a beautiful Spanish song for us. Anyways, we at Newman, at the college, we're hosting these strategic faith and reason seminars, and what we're trying to do is bring out Catholic professionals, those who have influence in their domain. We try to bring them out together for wine them and dine them for 3 to 5 days, depending on how things work. And we read great books together. So we have these seminars, and we're reading Plato and St. Augustine and St. Thomas, and great poetry and literature, and the popes. And we're trying together to see how can we, as leaders in our respective fields, in law, politics, education, wherever, how can we form ourselves to think in a Catholic way, so that as the darts are flying at us and we're losing our jobs and this and that, we can give a response that's rational, coherent, appealing, and informed by both reason and revelation. So anyways, we have these intensive seminars that we've started recently. Anyways, there's a father there, I think he was the oldest gentleman of the group. This man was a medical doctor, as it happened. And some of us men were asking him, and they have 4 children, and 2 of them, this particular fellow is Protestant. We let a couple of Protestants in. It's because we think we're going to get them. So he's a Protestant man, but 2 of his kids have become Anglican, as far as at least one. I think they're both Anglican and high Anglican, up the candlestick, so they're almost Catholic. They're flirting with that sort of thing. And then the other 2 became Catholic, and one of them is a seminarian right now at our seminary, St. Joseph's. So anyways, he's got kids who are seriously engaged in their faith and questioning and have moved from Protestantism towards Catholicism. So we were asking him, what was your secret? What can you impart to us? Most of us were probably in our 30s or 40s in this group, and we're asking his father, and without skipping a beat, he said, "Dinner." So the question was, how do we keep our kids? Show up at supper time and talk. Interesting, eh? So there's lots of other things you could say, but that's a big one. And there are studies that have been done on that particular question. What he's saying anecdotally is backed up when people look at it. I don't have all the numbers right in my head, but if you look at, a couple of metrics, such as, will a child graduate from high school? Will they do dope? Back in the day when that study was done, dope was still bad. But anyways, so will they do marijuana? Will they use alcohol? Graduate alcohol? Oh yeah, will they get pregnant before marriage? Will they go to college? I think these were kind of simple metrics that most people would think, yeah, that's probably better to do than not. On all 5 of those, if you abstracted any other feature of a kid's life and just asked this question, do they have a meal with their parents at least 5 days a week? Okay. That's the only thing. Do you have a meal with them 5 days a week? You're going to score much higher on all of those categories than would a kid who might have more money, might have more education, might be born into a more affluent situation, whatever, but they don't eat with mom and dad. So it's not rocket science. It's not that hard, but we have to be tough. We have to fight for those habitual moments in the day and in the week together. Now, of course, it doesn't always work. You can always do these beautiful things together, but you have to fight for the habits that make conversation happen, so that we're the ones impressing a culture on them and forming one together as a family in concert with the church, with the parish, maybe the school if it's a good Catholic school, other relatives and friends. But we are the ones that are impressing a culture on them and having one flourish, as opposed to having our kids always siphoned off and stolen. Why should we allow that? I don't let people come steal my piggy bank. Why the hell should I want someone to steal my kids? We should be indignant. It's heartbreaking. Okay. Let's stay happy, jumpy. So we've done enough on statistics, I think. Let's go to our next question. So where we've come so far, and we're coming to, we've got about 10 more minutes of talking, and then we'll pause, and then have some reflection, and then some opportunity for discussion. So where have we come so far? We've made the pitch that throughout the history of Western civilization and most others, marriage has universally been recognized. That it's the foundation to happiness. It's the foundation to our flourishing together and our happiness individually. That's the common story. However, oddly enough, we're abandoning it. We're moving towards making marriage from a public contract, a public institution, to a merely private choice. And these terrible statistics are bearing that out. So how did it happen? Well, lots of causes. Anytime you look at an interesting problem, you're likely to have an interesting array of causal influences. So I don't want to simplify so as to be simplistic, but at least there was a war at the level of ideas. And I'd like to identify three ideas, three what I'll call anti-marriage myths, that help to undermine this institution. It helped to make us feel less confident about speaking for it in public and fighting for it with our friends and relatives and kids. Okay, so here they are. You can take out your handout again if you'd like. We're at point number 3. Recognize the 3 marriage myths that came of age in the 1960s. Here they are. 1, marriage is good for men but damaging to women. Where did that come from? It's Marxist propaganda. It's not to say that some marriages aren't bad for women. Of course there can be. We live in a fallen state. What do you think is going to happen in such a world? But as an idea that gained any traction, it's just straight out of Marxism. And here's if you look this up, so to speak, you could look at Engels' book. So Marx and Engels are collaborators, where he calls the family the original cell of slavery. Women are simply the instrument for the production of children, he says. And if you get married, you're submitting yourself to slavery. So number one thing a Marxist wants to do is blow up the family. You know the Black Lives Matter movement? Okay, not that there aren't some features that the Black Lives Matter movement was correctly identifying. That's a totally different, separate question. But the causes or the remedies that they are promoting are fundamentally and absolutely and obviously Marxist. So if you went to their website, I think they took it down. At least I've heard. I haven't looked for a long time, but I believe they took it down. One of their propositions was, so what are their calls to action? One of their calls to action was to destroy the heterosexual family. And it's kind of shocking. Ooh, really? If I put a BLM sign up, I'm signing up for that? Yes, you are. And Marx says, here's the logic. It's not sort of out of rabbit's hat. Here it is. Marxism, premise 1, you start with materialism. All there is matter. Premise 2, somehow they get a concept of justice as equality. Where does that come from? It's really a magic's hat. Like if you're a materialist, there's no such thing as justice. Ever smelt it, weighed it, touched it, rolled around on the floor? No, of course not. It's an idea. It's a concept. An eidos, as the Greeks say. Okay, so somehow we get this idea of justice as equality. But we're only materialist. That's all we have to draw from. We have no other concepts like virtue or happiness, for example. That's what Christians think is more important, not that matter doesn't matter. So then they say, well, what happens when mom and dad, man and woman get together, the lady gets pregnant, she can't work for at least 6 to 24 months. And the man surpasses her. And she finds herself under his thumb because he can compete in a way that she can't quite. That's just sort of what happens when babies come. So then the Marxist answer is, let's bring all the apparatus of the state together to try to ameliorate that harm, that fundamental injustice, as they would say it. Because the lady's not making as much money as the man. And wherever she's not, there's got to be an injustice. Jordan Peterson, some of you probably know him or listen to him. We need to pray for him. In my view, he's something like a John the Baptist. He's not a Catholic himself, but he's talking about things that 20 years ago wouldn't be worth talking about. For example, there is human nature. You say that now, you're liable to a court challenge. If you say that at the public universities, I give examples till the cows come home, you are likely, or you might be, well, I'm saying if you're going to complain, you will be removed from your position. Just happened a couple months ago, not so far away. Anyway, so Peterson is saying things that now seem controversial and dangerous, but hello, before Marxism swamped our institutions, as it has now over the last 15 years, these were ideas such as perhaps male and female are complementary. Maybe money, in other words, isn't the only and most important metric, or political power. It's not that they don't matter. Of course they matter. But isn't there more to life than having a bigger bank account and competing one another? Couldn't you maybe be a team? Couldn't you be one flesh? Couldn't what benefits one benefit the other? Is that possible? All right. Yes, it is. Second anti-marriage myth. Adults have serious sexual and emotional needs. But kids, they're resilient. They'll bounce back. Quick anecdote. My grandparents, on one set, probably my aunts and uncles at least, and my mom in this case, and they'd say they didn't have a good marriage. At least for a lot of their time, they didn't. They fought a lot. It was uncomfortable. However, I'll say from my experience as a grandson and seeing how things unfolded, they by some metrics had a bad marriage, and that's let's take that as true. I wasn't there all those years, but let's accept that. However, by sticking it out together, they put the good of others in front of their own good. They made a sacrifice to say, I'm going to stick to my vow. And so what happened was that even that fractious relation could still become a canopy under which the rest of us could gather as a family. It's a beautiful and long-lasting gift that my grandparents gave to the rest of us. So where could we all go for Thanksgiving and Christmas and birthdays? Well, we could go to Grandma and Grandpa's because, even though things were kind of awkward, they stuck it out. Marriage isn't only about our own happiness. How narcissistic could we be? Marriage is a good that keeps on giving. And so we need to be able to fight against the newspaper columnists who say silly things based on Freudian and Jungian psychology. Okay, I'll move on. So take out this handout in the last 5 minutes here as we think together, before we stop and are silent for a moment or two. My pitch to you, so to speak, is that if we are as a church, as Christians, we're going to mount a defense against these anti-marriage myths and against these ideas and laws and practices that are undermining our stability as a society and our happiness. We've got to become philosophers. That is to say, we've got to learn how to ask good questions and identify what are the premises, what are people assuming? Like, why is your kid or why is your cousin, your niece, your nephew, why are they still just with their poodles? Why do they love their cats more than having kids? Why is that? we've got to engage them in a loving, charitable, but confident way. Okay, so here's some ideas I'd like to propose to you. If you look at this chart now. Okay, so what this is, and I offer this for your own reflection later on, take or leave as you like. When postmoderns, that is to say, when people who are when we've got Marxists parked in our minds, and we speak these anti-marriage, anti-family ideas, we're doing it because we've answered certain questions. What are the questions? 3, who are we? Where are we going? How do we get there? Everyone asks them. Who are we? What sort of creatures are we anyway? Are we just matter? It's the materialist answer. Are we really just spirit? That's the LGBTQ crowd answer. So the body doesn't matter, it's what's inside. You can't access it, so you better not judge what I say. It's absolutely and totally, utterly subjective. Okay, so is that, maybe that's true. I don't know, we've got to have a conversation. Or, so on the one hand, the LGTB crowd, those who try to give an articulation of this view, what they're going to say is they're just re-articulating ideas that have been around for 150 years. It's just people haven't taken them seriously, and all of a sudden they did. They come from Nietzsche and Rousseau. And what Nietzsche is saying is that the fundamental fact of being human is your will. Just your will. Your will or your subjective desire. That's the real you. And there's nothing else. There's no form to human nature. There's no purpose or end. There aren't laws that should help guide you. No. It's just you and your will. And no one has access to it, or no one ought to have access to it. That's not Nietzsche, by the way. They import that from other sources. But anyways. On the other side, you've got critical race theory. Now, if any of you work, those of you who are working in institutions of education or law or government, for example, or medicine, CRT, critical race theory, has flooded the gates. It's everywhere. I encourage, insofar as I can, I encourage our clergy to study what is CRT, because everyone who's in the working age and working in institutions that are kind of bumping up against law, all of us are being totally overwhelmed by these ideas, critical race theory, including in our schools. Oh my goodness. In schools in general. Okay. What are they saying? Critical race theory, as opposed to the LGBT theorists, they say that the thing that is most fundamental about you is your body. In particular, your race, your color. That's the one sole and most important determining feature about you. And then some races are good and other races are bad. It's actually that simplistic. If you care to read the documents and the books that are circulating. Anyways, but you can see how these two ideas can't both go together, right? On the one hand, it's just the inside that matters, the LGTB crowd. I might look like I have this body, but you better not judge me because I say I'm something different. You can't verify it, you can't falsify it. In fact, it's going to be illegal in a few months if you try to talk about it. Okay? And on the other side, the critical race theory, the Black Lives Matter crowd, they're saying, no, it's nothing to do with inside, it's outside. What's your race? And there are all kinds of celebrity cases recently where people have claimed to be, there's one in Saskatchewan just a few weeks ago, at the University of Saskatchewan, where a lady claimed to be of First Nations or Native descent. She said, I belong to this tribe. That's who I am. This is my identity. And then it came out, well, according to your DNA, you're European. And then there was a scandal and she, this is a mess. Like, I don't blame the lady. She's just combining two ideas that are floating around. I mean, I feel sad for her. I feel bad for her. She's confused, and she's been sold a bill of goods. But she's just drawing from, she's just bringing together straws that are already in the air. What's our end for? Well, is it power? Is it pleasure? Is it being a victim? Or is it, the Catholic would say, is it to be a child of God? Fratres. This is from 1 Thessalonians. Fratres. A delicto adeo. Brethren, beloved of God. That's your identity. That's my identity. That's our identity. We're children of God. Well, that changes the landscape, doesn't it? Now these other differences, and they're real. You have different feelings inside. Yeah, fine. You have different racial or ancestral compositions and cultural backgrounds. Yeah, they're real. Fine. But in the Christian dispensation, these are all secondary, because fundamentally, what are we? Beloved of God. We're all brothers and sisters. Why? Because we have the same Father in heaven. You get rid of the Father, and the children start to fight. Lastly, how do we achieve it? Well, in the postmodern view, it's get rid of external restraints. Or, that's the one side, that's the individualist mode. Or we're going to swing to the other side. That's what's going on. Or totalitarian means. Everyone's got to be locked down, doing the same things, thinking the same things. If you don't, you're bad. Okay, welcome to 20th century history. We've just been vacillating from one to the other. And in this decade right now, we're experiencing that shift. How is it going to land? I don't know. For Catholics, how do we get to our end? Well, we get to our end by acts of virtue, reception of the sacraments, lived out according to our duties of state. Virtue, sacraments, the fulfillment of our obligations. Those are the wings, St. Josemaria Escriva says. Our duties are the wings that give us lift, that allow us to reach our end. They're not burdens. I mean, sometimes they feel like it, sure, but we were all 15 once. Like, get over it. It's actually fun to do good after you've done it a little while. It feels better to do good, to fulfill your obligations. It's joyful. Well, my friends, I think we've come to our sacred hour. Let me summarize and then lead us into a few moments of silent reflection. So we've started off, the goal of these 3 days together is to ask this question. How is it that we can, in our own families and in the families that we relate to, how can we embody and encourage our families so as to become centers of thriving Catholic culture? How can we do that? Tonight's reflections have been considering how ideas are going to play into this mix. What are the ideas that are undermining the family? I named 3. And how can we engage them? We're going to engage them by both faith and reason. And that includes being armed with some statistical evidence. I'll save this anecdote for tomorrow because we're running out of time. Anyway, so both faith and reason. And we have to be willing to engage people in conversation. Sometimes it's said that some people quote St. Francis of Assisi and say, well, act well and say words only if needed. That's not true. You have to act well and you have to say words all the time. We're always talking, we're always engaging with each other. Of course there's a time to be quiet, yes. But you know what? People have been convinced out of their faith by years, by decades of indoctrination in schools, through media, and through our public advertising. We have to be on the offensive. Otherwise, we're dead. Otherwise, who cares if we're dead? Otherwise, we're not giving honor to God, who called us to be children of God, and to bring that good news, that liberating message of virtue, the sacraments, and fulfilling our duties of state. That is good news. When you bring those 3 things together, you're going to find that you're at the top of the food chain of happiness. Oh, praise the Lord. Well, next night, what we'll do is we're going to turn and, if this was boring, my wife was right. Sorry. Next time we're going to keep these ideas in view, and we'll make reference to them, but we're going to become very practical and think, how is it that we can structure our day, our week, and our year so as to weave within the fabric of our day a liturgical life, so that we can help put the building blocks into place so that we can be islands of holiness for others. And I'd like to end with I've got some questions for your own review and later, but I'd like to ask you to consider making this one examination question and then one resolution. So here's the question for examination. It's at the end of your sheet. When modern culture and Catholic teaching clash, am I honestly willing to investigate the reasons for the Church's sexual teaching? Am I honestly willing to look into it, to inform myself? And if I am, how can I equip myself to defend this glorious teaching about the dignity of the body better? I'd like to invite you to take 2 minutes of silence, and I'd ask you to make a resolution. Either to pray one rosary in thanksgiving for your marriage or the marriage of someone else this week, or this week read a few paragraphs from the Catechism on marriage, or this week have a difficult conversation with a friend or relative about sex and marriage that's been niggling away at you for a while. You know you're being called to have that discussion in a gentle, courteous, strategic way. Now is the time that the Lord wants you to have that conversation. He's now equipping you. He's now gently pushing you forward to have the courage to open that door and to trust Him that He will lead you. Just take 1 minute of silence. Jesus, help us to carry through on our good resolutions, trusting in your divine providence, confident in your help, joyful in the expectation of your second coming. We rely on your grace to live a supernatural life, bringing light and love and truth to all those that we meet. And so we ask, through the intercession of your Mother, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Topics. And it's so unfortunate that we cannot have a social because of the COVID restrictions. But at the same time, we are not going to push you out. If you would like to linger on and talk to each other and spend some time, we are not going to close the doors anytime soon. So you can feel free in the hall and talk to each other and discuss. And more importantly, I would like to have some feedback how this evening was, so that if there is anything that we could do more, we'll be happy. So feel free to let us know. Also, thanks to everyone who were watching us online. Thanks for joining us. Please do let us know how you felt this evening. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Now, Father, if I could just clarify, did we, at the beginning I had made the promise that they could ask questions. Should we put that off to next time, or what?
If someone has got some question, feel free.
Okay, I think we build it as till 8:30. If you want, feel free to go. But if you wanted to ask questions, I don't like to offer that and then not do it if we can. Feel free to raise a few questions as you wish, but also feel free to go, and we will wrap it up within 5-ish minutes. Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Ed, and I got one question really, especially with regards to rights and privileges, right? Which in turn would affect the individual's decision, right? So when they were formulating the Constitution, right? I know from way back that they said the church should not be with the state's laws, right? Now, when they're formulating the Constitution, as I've said, was there or were there people that are religious that could have an impact on the Constitution itself as far as the rights of individuals? Let's say right now we're talking about the LGBT and the CRT and all the rest. As far as I gauge right now, the new generation really are speaking too much about their own rights. They don't, although they're Catholic, they're religious or something, what's important for them is their own self.
Okay. So you were, as I take it, you were asking a question and making a comment. The question was, if I understood you, at the period of the foundation of the Canadian Constitution, were there religious people or influences on the Constitution? Something like that? Well, yes, obviously, clearly. I mean, now which Constitution are you talking about? We've got a few. So we've got the settlement of 1867, so Confederation proper. We have before that certain acts like the British North America Act. Okay, so we've got, but the founding of the country usually 1867, and then you've got the implementation of the Charter in 1982 by Trudeau. So these are very different sorts of events, and I'm not sure where you want to go, in that line, but sure, all Western societies. Let's make a general comment. Oh yeah, of course, all Western societies have it their all liberal democracies have at their foundation. You might say religious or philosophical presuppositions about the nature of human beings, one, and the nature of how communities relate to the government, two, that presuppose a Christian culture. And we could that's a bigger, longer discussion, but oh yes, of course that's the case. I'll just leave you with one idea. There's a concept in Catholic social teaching called subsidiarity. Now, it only got a name really in 1897, but it's been around since the beginning. And it's embedded actually quite strongly in federalism within our constitution because we've got a division of powers. We've got the federal government can do this, and then the provinces can do that. And then in a derivative way, we've got municipalities. But constitutionally, the big division is between the federal and the provincial. But anyways, behind that idea, in other words, and that's a good idea. We don't want a totalitarian state. A totalitarian state is one where all power is located in one place, and any intermediary community, like your bowling club, or like your soccer team, or like the family, all of their specific rights and privileges are wiped away in the face of some principle that's dictated on high. So that's a totalitarian principle. Now, if you want to know where did the shift come in Canadian society, well, most legal scholars who are interested in this would say it happened in '82 when Trudeau brought the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in, and we could keep talking about this. I could give you citations. For example, 1984, Crown versus Big M. It was a key case when Sunday shopping became illegal. Having stores closed on Sunday became illegal. It was sort of the first test case of the new regime. Anyway, so yeah, no, there's a dramatic shift that's going on, and we're in a fight to see where it all comes out. Thanks for that question. So one or two others.
The outer wedlock certificate you have, do you mean married or not married and living together, or is it just the mother with no father around at all?
Yeah, typically it would be where they're not married, because it's harder to track, and the way that we've tracked cohabitation has shifted. So now, more recently in Canadian law, there are some shifts in that. So, for example, if you live together, common law, after X number of months, you're considered, from a legal point of view, to have an equivalent status, more or less, as marriage, and certain obligations flow. So, most people who study this would use marriage as the defining figure because it's hard to track the other one. Like, how do you know if you're really in love or just a little in love, and you're there on weekends, but not? Yeah, anyways.
It seems like in North America, we're really having trouble with a lot of women having kids, and the father just goes right out of the picture.
Sure.
And there's multiple fathers sometimes. It's just like totally separated, so they're considered out of wedlock.
Yeah. If you want to know, let's say we play politician for a second. You want to find out what could we do? What would be the single most important policy shift besides getting rid of abortion, obviously? But after that, what would be a key policy shift we could enact? I'll give you one. You look at 100 incarcerated men. Most who are incarcerated are men, overwhelmingly. You want to find a predictor or a metric that would let us know, this boy in 10 years is going to be in prison. Okay. What you don't look at is race or money or education. Those are relevant, but they're not the most important. The most important is you ask, did dad tuck him in at night? Does he know his father? 95% of incarcerated men say they have no relationship with their dad. Is your last one? Yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Rhian.
Okay. I have 3 questions,
Oh!
but I can't remember them.
Okay, perfect. We'll come back to you. Okay.
I just wanted to ask, so the statistic about Canadian women marrying 1.5 children,
Mm-hmm.
and then 6% in Nigeria,
Yes?
unmarried women, and 74% in Colombia. Do you know how many children those women bear in Nigeria and Colombia at all?
Well, in sub-Saharan African countries, it's something like 4, I think, and that's what Canada was in 1955. It was close to 4. So they are where we were when your grandparents were young. I don't know about Colombia, about South America. But why do you ask? That's intriguing. You just wanted to...
And then I'm wondering about the role of contraception too.
Sure. Oh, in those societies, yeah. Well, obviously, if you graph the decline of the number of children with the advent and increasing dissemination of contraception, there's a correlated relationship, obviously.
If there's only 1.5
Yep.
children born, it means only about 30% of those children don't have a father.
Yeah.
That's not a very good number.
It's a bad number. It's a really bad number. Yep. It's where African Americans were in 1960. And in 1960, there was I think it's called the Monahan Report, if I recollect. There was a sort of a tipping point in social scientific research in the U.S. at that time, where they thought, where they saw that the black African American family was imploding, and they predicted that we'd have mass increase of crime and dropout rates and violence because of this crisis. Now people, sometimes I've heard commentary say that, well, this was to disparage that as though it's racist or something to talk about that, but I actually can't understand how someone could make that argument. It's just a correlative relationship. If you get rid of dads, not Thomas Clarence, there's a African American economist. His name's a famous guy. Jumped out of my head right now, but there are lots of people that make the claim in the U.S. that they'll say that, or some people will point out that actually during slavery, which is a horrible, wicked institution, the African American family was more intact in the United States than it is now, and that under oppressive and awful conditions. It is bad. It means you're going to have to buy an extra security system. It means that Big Mama State moves in. That's what it means. As the family recedes, the government balloons and grows. But there's always hope, and that's why we're gathering together in the presence of the Lord. The church has been through worse, and she will ride triumphantly to glory, kicking and screaming. Well, thank you very much for coming. God bless you. I don't want to keep it any longer. Thank you, Father, for inviting me, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night at 7. God bless.